Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Just to make sure you're at the right place, this is the Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, how to reduce your attack surface. So if you just randomly came to sit, that's good too. My name is Amitai Rotem. I'm from the WDATP engineering team, and I'm here to explain a little bit about how we can help you protect yourself. So first and foremost, I've got to give the intelligent security graph slide, which you've probably already seen at many sessions. The point here is not to show how much data we have. It is obvious Microsoft has a lot of data. But what I'll try to do in this short theater session is explain how we use this data to better protect you, right? So the first thing that we see is this is the world. 2.6 million people across over 130 countries get 1.7 million first-seen attacks, meaning these people are getting the attacks for the first time in the world. And those attacks are over, in 60% of the cases, in under 1 hour. So that's it, right? That's why we call them first-seen attacks, because these aren't attacks that live for days and weeks, and traditional methods can kind of catch up. You've got these millions, literally millions of attacks that happen day in and day out, and either one or just a handful of people get these attacks. And so when we think about the way to protect you, we've got to really think about the layered approach. There is literally nowhere to hide except up in the cloud somewhere in space, right? So hopefully by now I've scared you enough and you're agreeing that we need to protect. So in Windows Defender ATP, we kind of think about this in the layered solution. Yes, you have the antivirus which will detect malware, and even a great antivirus, ML-based, next-gen, all the cool marketing buzzwords, at some point, they are going to fail. And we're going to have our EDR, endpoint detection and response. That's where we're going to see this coming into our network. We're going to see the breaches. We're going to investigate quickly. We're going to remediate quickly. But the first step that we should do is the attack surface reduction, right? Let's help all those other stages by making sure that there are less attacks that they have to learn and detect, right? Let's make sure that the attacker not only doesn't get to the door, but we catch them in the hallway to the door, right? And that's the premise of attack surface reduction. Now, we have a lot of components across this, which we have other theater sessions that are going to dig a little deeper, as well as a hands-on lab that you can do. In this short session, I wanted to concentrate on attack surface reduction rules, which is a confusing name, I know, because they are rules under the category of attack surface reduction, but attack surface reduction rules that we have as part of WDATP, as well as network protection. And we've got ransomware protection, we've got exploit protection, we've got firewall rules, we've got a lot of other components. So let's start with ASR rules for short. We introduced this concept in previous year's Ignite, right? So a year ago, we said, hey, this is coming. We're about to release this in 1709. And at the time, we mentioned a few of these rules. We said they're going to come, right? The conference was at the end of September. We said we're going to have rules against Office, because Office is a big attack vector. Attackers know it, especially sophisticated ones. They create malicious macros. Well, that's great. Let's disable macros in our organization, right? That's the easiest solution. And there is literally no organization to date that I've ever worked with that said that is possible. Not even, defense departments. There's always a reason they need macros. So let's limit what they can do. And one of the things is running other executables. Now, you may think this is needed or not, but these are just some of the attacks since last Ignite, since the end of last September to date, which have used zero-day vulnerabilities and CVEs that were published, unfortunately, that were found in Office, which allowed a sophisticated attacker, either directly or through social engineering, to get their malicious code to come through, right? Look at the amount of these attacks that we've just had, and this is just in the first half, actually, of 2018 and the last half of 2017. Specifically, I want to drill into one real-life one that actually got a lot of press, which is usually a good thing for these kinds of things. And that was a new type of locky ransomware that was spreading using DDE. So DDE, Dynamic Data Exchange, is a platform where Office apps can communicate with each other. And it's something that we need, right? This is how Word can embed an Excel sheet in it. So we can't limit it, right? That's kind of too hardcore. So what the attackers did, socially engineered malware spam campaign, sent it to users. Users got this pop-up that said, hey, this document contains links. I need to update. Is that OK? And who here would press no? Good. Yeah, no. You're lying. Literally, every single person sitting here would press yes, right? We're getting a document. It's from our corporate email. We're going to say yes. It doesn't even look suspicious. And then once you do that, what it did, it ran command. It used PowerShell to then download the malicious payload, right? So it had a few hops there, and then that PowerShell downloaded the bad thing, ran it, and there we have ransomware, right? It sounds simple. Obviously, in real world, it's a little more sophisticated. But this is the place, right? Yes, antivirus, a lot of things can try to figure out that this thing at the end is bad. But how about we stop it right here and say, yeah, DD, you're fine, dynamic data exchange. But once you started to try to run an executable, yeah, we're going to stop you. So that's something that we released in 1709. So about a year ago now, went GA. As well as some other things, including script-based rules, like I don't want to allow obfuscated PowerShell and VB script in my organization. And this is a really interesting rule, because a lot of people come back to me and say, wow, all these make sense. I'm going to go tomorrow to my organization. I'm going to enable them all in block mode, and I'm going to be better protected. Microsoft, why don't you just make my life simpler and put this out of box Windows? Makes so much sense. Well, that's because some of these rules may be applicable to your organization, and some might not. And the obfuscated PowerShell one is a great example, actually, of some early adopters that went out and implemented it immediately in block mode, and then came back and said, oh, no, our own IT department is using obfuscated PowerShell scripts, right? And they don't want to change, and that's fine, right? They're saying, look, we're deploying all these scripts to our end users. We know it's not a security boundary, but we rather the common users don't just immediately know what we IT are doing and where we're going. It's their choice. But in that case, this rule is not applicable to them, right? So there's a thought process here. One thing that we give companies is the ability to put these in audit mode. So you'll see the signals. You'll hear the signals. Using Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection's Security Center, you can go and hunt for these, right? Reactively look at them. You can look at the alerts if there is an intrusion and learn, you know what? In some cases, we can turn this on. Some cases, we can't. And where there was an attack, we can understand it. Then in 1803, so this last April, we continued adding rules. And the way we added rules was customer feedback and the threat landscape, right? What rules can we package in that will actually be durable security measures for your organization, right? They're not reactive. The last thing we want to do is create another ASR rule that lives for 2 days because a previous attack looked like something, right? So one thing that we did was block executables from running unless they meet a prevalence, age, or trusted list criteria. And it's an interesting rule, and going back to the intelligent security graph, this is where kind of Microsoft has that secret sauce, that unique value. So a common thing that I see in enterprises are they don't want USB devices used in their org. USB keys and USB storage is an attack vector. So they go out and say, we are going to be hardened. We're going to limit the usage of USB devices. And they do that for a couple of days until they get enough angry emails of people that are trying to put their PowerPoint presentation from their laptop on a USB stick and stick it into the presentation machine, and they can't do it. And so they have to open up USB. Well, at that point, they're opening up their attack surface very wide. So this rule is an interesting one, because what you can do is say, great, we're going to allow these things to happen. But if you're trying to run an executable, an exe, a .com, DLL, actually some scripting languages as well, like PowerShell, you're trying to run it. Before we let you run it, we're going to go into the ISG, the Intelligent Security Graph, and ask it, what do you know about this file? Now, the ISG can answer in 3 ways. It could say, I know this is good. Great, go ahead, run it. I know it's bad. The antivirus is going to catch it. That's great. But it could also say, I don't know. I honestly don't know. You are the first person. You're the second person in the world. You're the third person in the world that has ever asked me about this file. Now, going back to our telemetry, what we know is the good files get run often, right? They get run literally millions and millions of times. A file that you're the first person or the second person to see in the world is probably bad. Now, maybe you're the dev team, and so we're not going to enable this rule, right? Because you keep compiling new stuff all day. But if you're the CEO or you're the CEO's admin, you're probably not running software like that, right? The software you're running is well, has good reputation, and therefore we can block it at this point. We also help with lateral movement, flagging, credential stealing, as well as limiting PSExec and WMI. Going back to why you need to put thought process into this, does anyone know of a software that uses PSExec as part of its standard operating procedure? It's a common software, System Center Configuration Manager. So if you're an SCCM shop and you enable this rule, that's not really good, right? So all these rules are great to reduce the attack vector where you're not using capabilities. You're an Intune shop. Great, let's enable this rule. There's no reason for PSExec to run. And specifically, kind of a clickware demo, just because I didn't want to take too much dependencies on the Wi-Fi here, on how this would look. So here I have a VB script, right, that basically gets a WMI object and then uses that to execute Notepad, right? Think of Notepad as that malicious payload that I want to use WMI as my attack vector, especially remote WMI. And so if I don't have this ASR rule, right, I run that script, Notepad runs, obviously. But now let's enable that rule. So one way that you can enable these rules, I'm using here the Intune UI. We go into the security settings, into Windows Defender Exploit Guard. Under that, you'll see attack surface reduction. And then specifically, I'm going to look at that rule, process creation from PSExec and WMI. I've got 3 settings, basically not configured, meaning let it run. Audit, hey, I don't want you to block this, but I want you to put notifications into my console. And then block, which we'll do here. The other way we can do it is PowerShell. We can obviously also use System Center to do it. Wouldn't recommend doing this specific rule through System Center. So PowerShell, I'll enable it. And then you can see kind of this is the output of how the settings look. It's a little less usable, right? It's GUID-based, it's unfriendly. But definitely through System Center and through Intune, you can do it across your org. And then I'm going to run that same thing, and I'm going to get this notification, right? It's not a malware notification, but it is saying your IT admin doesn't want this behavior. They don't want this to run. So that's how it'll look at the end user. Now, in 1809, so the release next month, which we have now in the Windows Insider builds, are 2 new ones. One is process creation from Office communication apps. That is a really long and official name to call Outlook. So same thing that we're doing with Word and Excel and PowerPoint. I don't think Outlook should run other executables or scripts. And Adobe Reader. It's not just Microsoft tech, right? It's not just our stuff that have vulnerabilities. Adobe Reader, that is also an attack vector that attackers like to use. So we're going to add these 2 new rules, and you're going to see them now in preview. So shifting gears to talking about network protection. Who here has heard about supply chain attacks? OK, very few people. So I will educate the crowd around supply chain attacks. This is a big attack vector in 2018. It started during 2017, but we saw a big uptake in 2018. What attackers do is they say, look, you are a very well-protected org. You are a Fortune 200 company, a Fortune 500 company. You are a bank. You know security. You've got the best security people. Your security operations team keep monitoring everything. I am not going to be able to get into your org. But I'm going to learn your org, and I'm going to learn what your end users use. And I'm going to learn what line of business apps, what expense apps they use, what third-party apps they use. And I'm going to look for a vulnerability over there to get in. Specifically, one of these attacks that happened late last year got a lot of headlines around CCleaner. Not to pick on them personally. There have been a lot of major attacks. But what happened here specifically was attackers actually hit a few million people, but they didn't care about that. That wasn't their end goal. What the attackers wanted to do was attack a few select companies. And they found out that their corporate security allows CCleaner through. Their app control, which is very regulated, allows CCleaner. In some cases, there's also antivirus exclusions around CCleaner's folders for better performance, right? Because it's a great app and it's trusted. And so what the attackers did in that case was they went and they tainted CCleaner. They put their malicious code there. They hacked into them, knowing that that is going to get into those corporations. And then when they look at that bit, right, their code only executes in those organizations. Say, hey, here's an attack. Here's the org I want to attack. It lights up, downloads the malicious payload, and they're in that secure organization. So that's a huge attack vector that obviously antiviruses are trying to accommodate. But sometimes orgs, exclude the antivirus from that, right? And they whitelist everything. So what we can do is through network protection. So here's how, let's say, this Contoso app, my line of business app, it usually runs and everything's great. And here figuratively I'm saying, oh, someone has poisoned it and now it's going to auto-update itself and it's going to go to a malicious site to get it, right? It detected that I'm the company it wants to attack. It's going to download it. It's probably not going to tell me that, but in this case it is. Well, let's go to network protection. What we do in network protection, against under exploit guard, network filtering, we're going to turn it on in blocking mode. Now what's going to happen is when we run the same thing and it's trying to communicate with its command and control center, we go into the intelligent security graph, right, and say, what do you know about this URL? And in this case, we're not going to go for unknowns. We have a heavier bar, a higher bar of bad malicious IPs and URLs, the same ones that you might recognize from Windows Defender Smart Screen, right? And we go there and we say, uh-oh, this URL is bad. Block the connection, right? Throw an exception for that software. And one cool thing you see here, which, remember that previous pop-up, it was kind of cryptic, your IT blocked something. One thing we allow you to do through Intune and through GPO is customize that message. Right? You don't want confused end users. So you can say, hey, my org, Amitai's org, is not allowing you to communicate here. And by the way, here's a one button to call our help desk or email our help desk, or maybe just go to a web page, an internal web page that you can set up that will explain why this happened. So this lets users kind of understand what happened. And this is how we can kill those supply chain attacks even without really understanding what they're going to do. They might be using a zero-day vulnerability. They might have gone to our expense app provider. Now, what we're also going to release in a couple of weeks is the ability to customize those lists. So when you go into Windows Defender Security Center, you'll see a UI like this, which will allow you to add your own URLs and your own IPs. And you can say, I want to whitelist this. I want to allow it. You know what? You guys you're false positive on maybe a data center we have somewhere. Or audit, or block. And you don't have to do this manually. We actually integrate with any custom TI provider that you have. So if you are in the financial sector and you have your own custom proprietary TI that you want to bring in with URLs and IP addresses, that's great. Feed it in here. And basically what you get is this advanced firewall that is sitting on the endpoint. It's not sitting on hardware. It's not requiring everyone to proxy in through your organization. Someone can be at a Starbucks, right, and using their laptop, and still you'll be able to control which URLs and IPs they cannot access. Now, as I mentioned, there's a few more components that we didn't cover today, like ransomware protection through controlled folder access, firewall, exploit protection, hardware-based isolation using Windows Defender Application Guard, and application control. These are all great technologies that we have theater sessions. You are welcome to also come to our booth to learn a lot more about them. Finally, I want to end with Microsoft Secure Score. We talked about it a lot at the keynotes and over the past couple of days, but the way it plugs into here is, wait, Amitai, you kept telling us don't block immediately, do an audit, look at your org. So this is exactly how this dashboard is going to look for you. You're going to be able to look at your org and understand the different rules and how they execute, where you should block, where they're good in audit, which rules are noisy, and which ones are actually protecting your org. Before I leave you, first thing I do want to ask, because no one has badged you in, please fill out the survey. It really means a lot to us. It helps us understand which theaters are good, which ones you want more content. A lot of the demos I showed here, you can kind of self-do them on demo.wd.microsoft.com. We have a lot of those fake malware that you can use. Not everything that I showed, but you can try it out and test it out. We also have a hands-on lab here. That's the name. It's Hall 2024. That you can go through these scenarios and a few others and try it out yourself, starting from Intune through the malicious payloads and so forth. And then we have very detailed docs, especially about the very specific ASR rules, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and how you should use them. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.